So I'm treating to a little of Hempress Sativa, and I'm preparing to make my film about Jamaica. Without doubt, my 4 weeks in Jamaica completely changed my perception of reality in the best possible way. So much happened. The easiest way I can use words to describe being there for that time, it was like all the time I was there, I was having an experience that related to what people go through with LSD. I had 3 LSD experiences in my 20s, and one of the cliches that we have about such experiences when the person turns around to you and says, "Man, the colours." And that's what I experienced in Jamaica, the strong colours, the vibrancy, most especially the plants. It's not like England. England is basically the plants are green with a few bits and pieces, but they were all colours. They were so vibrant, so strong, and that's what I remember first and foremost about that experience. It was amazing. So I began my experience being in Kingston, Jamaica, and I stayed in a guest house in the suburbs, and I got to meet people. This was a very strange time to be in Jamaica though, because it was when the 2 sevens clash. The 2 sevens clash relates to 1977. It was a very dramatic time to be there. At that point the CIA were arming both the JLP and the PNP with guns, and there was a lot of violence. So it wasn't the easiest or the safest time to go there, and I was drawn to go there because I've been immersed in the music at that time for a few years. So taking us off from that first experience of that Iroy red, gold and green, which I mentioned earlier, it just got stronger, that connection with the people, with the land. Jamaica is called land of wood and water. That's the description we use to talk about Jamaica. And so I met people, as you do, and very quickly things evolved into a pattern. Now, all the time I was there, except for one moment, I was the only person with white skin, and very rapidly I lost any awareness of my skin colour because everyone around me was all the usual colours you expect to see in Jamaica. And what would happen is that people would be friendly, we'd strike up a short conversation, and all I needed to do was to offer 50 cents, and someone would come back very quickly with just a little bit of the green medicine, just enough to make me up a little smoke, and they would pass that to me, and that would be for me to experience. And what was really clear is that in the circles I moved in, they did not pass this bliss. It was a personal experience. So I found myself reasoning with Rasta men in Kingston, and when I went out into the countryside this process continued, meeting someone randomly, having an experience. And so let me continue. It was such an extraordinary time in so many ways. Mostly because I had my old belief systems and expectations about human interactions totally shattered, and that really happened when I got off the plane and I sat on the bus that was to take me from the plane to the airport, customs and immigration and all that, and we were waiting for people to get on the bus, and I paid and sat down, and the woman got on the bus, and within about 5 to 10 seconds she and the bus driver were having this massive argument. Where did that come from? It's extraordinary. And I just witnessed and experienced it, and within another 15 to 20 seconds They were laughing, they were joking, they were almost crying. They were so feeling their emotions, and they've been through this little journey together, taking seconds, and it's like that was my very first experience, and it just went on. One of the things I discovered quite quickly is that for a lot of the people in Jamaica, the possibility of buying a passport and travelling to another country at that time, it wasn't going to happen. So that made me of extraordinary interest, because I could give them some indication of what it's like where I lived in London and England, listening to the same music as I was listening to on the streets of Kingston. So that's the other thing about the place. The place is just music, awash music everywhere I went, in the city, in the country, and that was really just extraordinary, and it fed my delight in the music. So what I love about the music at that time particularly, and also very clear with Hempress Sativa, there is so much of a message there. People want to communicate something, they want you to consider what they've got to share, and very grateful for all the sharings that I did. And I want to talk about one particular one because it was so unusual. So I was so blown away by every place I went to, Kingston, Bath on the east coast, and Port Antonio on the north coast, that when I spent just over a week in those three places, all I could do was to go back to Kingston and start and do the whole thing all over again, because it was so amazing. And after I'd done that the second time, all I could do was to repeat the experience a third time, and that's how I took my 30 days of being there. So much. So I want to talk a little bit about Bath. So Bath is a place where it literally, what it says, they have a big building, and it's done like a hot steam bath, and all the water is literally coming from the hot spring. So it's hot spring bath, and obviously built over the spring, and just the delight of completely immersing my body in this wonderful healing water, healing stream. And I became aware that there's a lot of Rastafarian philosophy, and one of the things is what they call Aital, and Aital is their word for natural, and it's all about doing the natural stuff. So whether it's the water, drinking the mineral water, eating the food that you cook yourself from fresh ingredients, encountering the green medicine when offered, all these forms of natural living was fundamentally what it's about. So here I am, I've already been to Bath before, this is probably my second time, and I'm walking up the long road from where the bus stops up to the retreat centre itself. And on the way, I encountered what we would call the Ute, and the Ute are the young people, teens I would estimate, maybe even 10 years, that kind of age. And they encountered me, and we had an interaction. There was nothing to do with any green medicine at all. It was purely reasoning, which is what they're so keen on. And one of the questions that people would love to ask me is about what I ate, and I would say I'm vegetarian, and they said, oh yeah, you're a vegetarian, are you? And they would say, do you eat eggs? And I would say yes, and they would fall about laughing. They thought it was hilarious that someone could call themselves a vegetarian and eat eggs. That really wasn't where it was at from their perspective. And I felt like I wanted to share something with the guys, so I got out a loaf of bread from my rucksack and offered it to them, and they took it, they grabbed all the bits of it, they sniffed it, and they threw it in the air, because they knew it was full of chemicals. They weren't interested. And so one of them went up to a pineapple tree with his machete, when he hacked off this pineapple, and then I watched something which is pure gold for me, because what he did is he simply, using his machete, he hacked off all the outer peel, leaving the pineapple inside, but he did it in such a way that he cut grooves into the pineapple. It looked like a sceptre, the kind of thing a king or a queen would hold if it was made of gold or some material like that. And he just held it out to me like he was offering me this orb, this beautiful gift of nature. And I took it, and then it got sliced up, and we all ate it. We felt the juice running down our lips onto our chin, dropping into our body, and we just felt, wow, this is just so, for me that was like a great teaching from the youth. I was told about the gatherings of the 12 tribes that happen every month, every lunar month in Jamaica, and they actually still happen. A whole bunch of people get together in the country and they play music and they have the most wonderful party. And some of these gatherings are quite smaller, others are massive, where you've got big sound systems turning up, great variation and all that. So now I'm drawn to tell you about this particular experience. So I'd travelled around a fair bit at this point, and I was in the north coast in this place called Port Antonio, and I was just walking along, and this young guy met me and he offered that he would give me somewhere to sleep. So I thought, that's really decent. So I went to his place, to his yard as we would call it, and the building he was living in would be like the kind of thing that you'd have a garden shed in the UK, that kind of materials. And he sorted out a bed for me, and the following morning he made breakfast, and it was traditional Townies food in that part of Jamaica. So it was literally a big load of callaloo, which is like a Jamaican spinach, and that would be cooked in coconut oil and simmered down for a few minutes, so with what we call Jamaican hard dough bread. And if you've never experienced Jamaican hard dough bread, it isn't like any other bread I've ever eaten in my life. I'll have to be honest and say it's got a lot of chemicals in, but hey, that was the choice I had at the time. So it was the hard dough bread, the butter, and this callaloo. And I ate that and thought, my goodness me, that is just so, wow, I just felt so good from eating that. And so we got to know each other. I'd go off and do my thing, and I'd come back, we'd meet. This went on for a couple of days, and he said if I wanted, he would sort me out with some green. And he wasn't talking about 50 cents, he was talking about a different kind of amount altogether. And so I gave him what he asked for, and he turned up with some, and it was more than was required. And it was a bit straggly, I could see that, and I enjoyed smoking that and continuing to be there. And in fact, what then happened is he was simply just put on some sounds. In fact, we went to a relative's place, and the woman of that particular yard, she had a record player and some records. We just sat there and we just played some music. And they noticed straight away that I was so immersed in their music, because I started to move my body sitting on the chair to the rhythm. And they looked at each other and said, why, you mash up the music, which means that, yeah, totally sync to the music. And great times I had, really enjoyed it. And then the following day, went to do the same thing. And as I always did when I went to this other place, I turned up with my rucksack and put it down outside in the little yard. Went into the room, and they said, we've got something very special for you. Now, what was such an advantage for me in all my experience in Jamaica is I'd spent years studying language from listening to the music. Now, they saw me as a white man, and they would assume that I didn't understand anything of the way they speak when they speak to each other. But I'd been understanding every word all the way through. So I listened to them talking to each other, and one says to the other, right, we're going to give him this really strong stuff now, that will knock him out, then we're going to beat him up, and we're going to take his possessions. So I'm listening to all this thinking, well, I'm rather glad I understand everything that everybody says. So I just carried on completely relaxed, chilled, listening to music. They came out with this, what they call strong green, and I spoke to it, and it was absolutely fine. And I just said to them, I just stood up and I said, soon come. And that means you go out of the yard, into the alley somewhere to have a wee. That's what it is, you know it's going to do. So I just casually strolled out of the room, past my rucksack, just flipped it over my shoulder. I was walking along, closed the door of the yard, and ran as fast as I could to a completely different part of the town, and felt like, whew. Now with hindsight, I can see that my guides were doing overtime to keep me protected there, so thank you guys, as always. So then I was in Port Antonio, and suddenly it changed from being very safe to being pretty dangerous. It's like, what do I do now? Where do I go? And I just ran into the centre of the town. I went to where the buses go, and I arrived at the bus stop to see the bus just pulling away too fast for you to run after it and catch it. So I thought, right, what do I do now? And I walked along, and I was obviously in a state of severe shock, overwhelm, upset, fear, and all the rest of it you'd expect, really. And I saw this guy just bimbling along really slowly on his bicycle. Nice Rastafarian guy, looked a bit older than the other guy. This one looked like he'd be in his mid-20s, I guess. And he just took a look at me, and he could see something. And he went over to me, we ended up having a conversation, and he invited me to go with him to his yard. And I instantly had a sense of knowing this man I trust. And so with a sense of relief, I went with him, and I went to his yard, and we got to know each other much more deeply than the other guy I got to know. And I stayed there for days, and he provided me with all sorts of experiences. Perhaps one of my favourites is simply a walk from his yard into the town. That's about 1 mile. Well, that 1 mile walk took us a length of time which my Londoner's mindset found mind-blowing, because it took us probably 45 minutes to do that mile. And every time Chucky saw and got close to a human being, it was smiles, it was handshakes, it was back clasps, it was a few words and moving on to the next one. And that's the way he lived his life and did his day. He would go down the market and we'd buy all the ITAL food, the fresh fruit and vegetables, the coconut oil to cook it all in, and I provide him with the money to do so. And then we go back, and he's got an oil drum in his yard, and there's a few skewers on the top of it, and there's a space in the side, and he just gets 3 lumps of coconut wood from the coconut tree. He puts a tiny bit of coconut oil on the bottom of one of the pieces, puts a lighter to it, and is instantly flaming. And he's got himself one of the most controllable cookers I've ever come across in my life. In some ways, even better than any conventional thing like gas. He learned to control it so well, so he'd put the cooking pot on the top and the coconut oil would go in there, tiny little fraction of salt, and then we would go with the plants in a particular order, which was very clear he had a complete understanding of. And he would cook up the ital, and then when it was all done, either just the two of us, or if anybody else was around, we'd join in as well. We'd all sit down and eat this extraordinarily nourishing food that he made for us. And that's one of my gastronomic experiences of my life, eating with Chucky out in his yard on the north coast of Jamaica. So another thing about the north coast of Jamaica which is really interesting is the weather. So around 2 o'clock in the morning until about 6 o'clock in the morning it rains every night. 4 hours of rain followed by 20 hours of brilliant sunlight. So if you wake up after 6, all you see is a blue sky and the bright sun, and that goes all the way till 2 o'clock the following morning. And he said that's the deal. It's like that every day of the year. It's like, when I'm used to English weather, this is completely couldn't conceive of what that was like. Now, one of the issues I did have being out there, particularly up on the north coast, was the mosquitoes, and I was a rather attractive target for them. And I did a bit of walking around, and I did notice that there was a particular headland, the land just stuck out into the sea, and you could see a beach over to the left, and there were trees and other plants growing there, and there was also an ancient lawn, and there were buildings which were falling to pieces. And this little area was used by the army. They used to go up there once a month and have exercises in this little plot of land. But there was always a breeze blowing, and this breeze was just strong enough to prevent the mosquitoes from biting. And so I made this choice. I thought, this is absolutely fantastic. Right, I'm with Chucky in the daytime. When it's time for me to go to bed, I don't have the energy and the stamina that these dudes have got. That's because they have a special way of sleeping. They don't sleep the way Westerners do. Westerners get their one night of sleep, monophasic sleep, what most people have. In the Mediterranean, use of biphasic sleep, they'd have a nighttime sleep and have an afternoon sleep. Well, the Rastafarians in Jamaica didn't do either of these. They took naps as and when they felt like they wanted to do so, and they showed no signs of sleep deprivation. I did notice that. So I've got this location and I'm going to go sleep there, so I do. So I don't bother to take all my things out there. I literally just take the clothes I'm standing in and my sleeping bag. I'm wrapped in my sleeping bag, you'd laugh, but in those days I used to wear pyjamas. I have my pyjamas in the sleeping bag. And I would take myself out to my favourite little spot and I just lie down, get into my pyjamas, get in the sleeping bag and have the most beautiful night's sleep. And I wake up in the morning, I could hear the sounds of the sea, the sounds of the surf, seagulls. So beautiful. I had so many experiences of out of this world beauty being there. And this went on for a while, and each time I went into Port Antonio it would be the same story. Be with Chucky, nighttime sleeps on the headland. And then there was one occasion when around about 2 o'clock in the morning I heard a sound. And it wasn't a sound I was used to, otherwise I wouldn't have been woken up by it. So what happens, I got up, standing on top of my sleeping bag in my pyjamas, and this dude appears and he's got a large machete in his hand and he wants to take my possessions. And he asked me what I've got, and of course remember I understand every word that is being said, so I make it really clear to him this is the situation. I'm here, I just sleep here at night, my things aren't here, my rucksack's not here, I don't have any money here, all I've got is what you see me with. And then the guy notices on my wrist a watch. So he sees this and grabs hold of my wrist, snatches the watch off my wrist and stumbles away muttering, and he's not happy because all he's got is a watch. And it was very funny for me because actually that was given to me by a customer in London named Ivor, and it was a very, very cheap watch, but it was what at that point the Rastafarians in Jamaica loved. It was digital. At that point they absolutely loved anything digital. So that was it. He had my watch and I really wasn't that bothered. And time went on, and then there came a point where Chucky took me out into the country, and the first trip was to a friend. Now what that had happened at that point in Jamaica's history, the government, which was the PNP, and it was Manley, was the Prime Minister, and he had created laws which meant that any Jamaican resident, any citizens of Jamaica was entitled to apply for a piece of land. What they did is they confiscated land from people like Errol Flynn and other rich white people, and they divided it up into half-acre plots. So go to visit this guy and he's got his half-acre plot, and right in the centre there's a straw hut like what you might imagine in Africa, and that looks amazing. And the whole plot is just full of all these plants growing, and it's a 3-season year, so they've got 3 growing seasons in the year, plants growing in all states because you've got pretty much the same temperature all the time. You've got water every early hours of the morning, so these plants are absolutely thriving. And I go into his hut and I can see hanging up a lot of tobacco, because they really do like the tobacco out there as well as the green. And this particular point he invites me to try his tobacco, and at that point I had not experienced Mapacho. I would say it's the only thing I could relate it to, extraordinarily strong, a couple of puffs, that was all I could handle of that. And then we went off on a little further excursion, even deeper into the hills, higher up, more into the countryside, and we found a wild place, and there was a breadfruit tree. So what happened is they hacked this breadfruit off the tree. They made a little fire with a coconut wood and a few drops of coconut oil, and they threw the breadfruit onto the fire when it was burning well, and the whole of the outside of the breadfruit became black. I'm looking at this and thinking, okay, so you're burning up a breadfruit, yeah, I wonder what we're going to do here. And when they decided it was ready, they just kicked it out of the fire, waited it to cool for a little bit, and they broke off all the black outer shell, and inside it looks like an orange in as much as it was segmented, but the segments were this beautiful snow white colour. And they broke open the hole and broke it into segments and just passed a segment to each of us, and I bit into the segments and I thought, that is what white bread is supposed to taste like. That is what they tried to achieve with white bread and never managed to get there. And it's a funny thing, but that's the only time in my life have I ever experienced a roast breadfruit. And it was so melt in the mouth, sweet but not too sweet, slightly savoury, very carby, very energy replenishing. It was just so beautiful. So that's another experience I remember from being out there. And I could go on, but I think that's as much as I feel like sharing with you, except to say no, there is one more. There was another point. He took me to a different location up in the hills, and I got to meet a little community of Rastafarians. My first experience, I could hear shouting, and they were all playing a game, and the game is a very familiar game for English people. It's called Ludo, and it's just moving your little counters along the squares trying to get home. That's what you do. And I'm watching this game played, and I've played this game a lot, particularly as a child, but I saw people playing with passion and intention and emotion so charged. I thought, wow, that was just extraordinary just to watch them playing this game. Their whole selves were in it, and they were playing about, they were being funny, they were being mischievous. It was just so good to watch. And I got introduced to a man, and he was tasked to provide me with something. So we made our order, and a week later we came back, same place, and I was given 2 bottles. I was given a bottle, a litre bottle, and this was medicine for the blood, and another bottle, and that was medicine for the nerves. And the blood tonic contained 20 different herbs, and the nerve tonic contained 16 different herbs, and each tonic bottle contained 1 small ganja plant. And this was my medicine, because Chucky, although he may not have had any medical qualifications, when he met me, he knew something was up, and it was proved, because when I went back to England, it was discovered, yes indeed, I did have dengue fever, which is a very debilitating thing, a little bit like malaria, but not quite. So I didn't know I had dengue fever at the time, but he could see it, and that's why he insisted that we went off and got these tonics for me for the blood and the nerves. I started taking them every day, took them every day for the remainder of my time in Jamaica. And when I went back to England, thank goodness, the customs authorities were absolutely fine. My rucksack was full of records. I must have had well over 100 7-inch singles in that rucksack. Some tunes I would have 3, 4, even 5 copies of, because they were so good and I wanted to share them with my friends. So I've got all these records, and I've got these 2 bottles. How did you get all that into a rucksack? But I did. Through the customs, they looked at the records, they weren't at all interested in the bottles. That's absolutely fine. So I continued to take both these tonics every day, 1 measure, until they were gone. And I swear to this day that that would be one of the main things. First of all, it was my first experience of a plant medicinal experience. I'm being given a medicine for a particular illness. In this case, it was dengue fever. Having the medicine, going to the GP, getting the diagnosis, and knowing that the only RX from the NHS was rest. So I rested, I wasn't able to work, and I kept on with the medicine, and I got over it completely. I had about a month off, and my feeling is that after 4 weeks in Jamaica, I needed a month to digest and process all of my experiences. So it's great gratitude to Chucky, great gratitude to Neville, who I never even got to speak about, and great gratitude to all the people that I met out there, because all those interactions helped to free me from my old conditioning. Thank you very much.